Second story!
Before I begin, I would like to make a quick note. I've decided to make the video Pie in the Face an official episode of the show because it's done so well. So before it wasn't, and now it is. With that said, let us travel deep into the abyss of madness and stare into the eyes of death itself as I tell tonight's story, The Teddy Bear. There are many types of lost souls in this world. There are those you see at the bar, drinking a cup of beer all by themselves and seem to be contemplating something so deep. There are those out in the middle of the streets, waving around a can looking for a few coins. And then there's an altogether different sort. A teddy bear lying in a rubbish bin didn't look like it was a lost soul, but it was, and it was about to find someone that was going to take it in, for the better or for the worst. Raymond Wayward, a businessman, was walking down the road, and he was thinking about what he was going to do, where life was going to take him. And as he passed by the rubbish bin, he noticed the bear there, and he picked it up, and it was raining at this point, very light rain, but one nonetheless. And as he looked at the bear and its dirty fur and its black marble eyes, he remembered how he had had one as a child, and he used to love playing with him out in the fields. He had called him Charlie, and he thought that maybe this was a good omen. He put it underneath his arms, and he walked over to the Crossroad Hotel. Anyways, he entered, and he rang himself out, and he rang the bear out, and he said, good evening to the, Tom, the landlord there, and Tom waved his old wizened hand. The two of them had known each other, since Raymond had been a kid. He used to love to come to this hotel. In fact, the Wayward family was a good friend of the Spinster family. They had Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners together, and he had good hopes, Raymond, that he was going to be able to buy this place, but he hadn't found out yet. Anyways, he arrived at the door, but as he was turning it, he thought he heard noises behind it. And when he opened it up, he wasn't surprised, but he might have been just a little bit taken aback, for Lawrence had a smile on his face and a glass of wine in his hands. And Raymond just looked at him, and Lawrence said, "We did it, partner. They've decided to sell. We're going to be the next Hilton. We're going to be the next Statler. We're going to be the next Waldorf." And Raymond said, "Well, I'll drink to that." And he grabbed hold of a wine glass on the table, and they both had a drink and began talking about how nice it was that they were going to own a hotel in their own small town, and maybe eventually they could own a whole chain of hotels all across America. And as they were talking, Lawrence noticed the teddy bear in Raymond's hand, and he said, "Well, what's that?" And Raymond said, "Oh, I just found it on the side of the street. I thought I might sell it or something." "Well," said Lawrence, "as long as you don't take it to the meeting next week." Anyways, they had a good laugh about this, and it was time for him to go. It was late. He just wanted to tell him the news, but he left the room, and Raymond got himself ready for bed, showered, brushed his teeth, all that. And as he lay down on the bed, he wondered where indeed life was going to take him, and he looked over at the teddy bear and thought to himself that this was going to be a good omen. This was going to be a good beginning. But as he went to sleep, in the night he thought he heard something, a creaking in the floorboards. He thought he heard some kind of whispering. And the next morning when he woke up, it didn't trouble him too much, but he went over to the table, and he did notice that the teddy bear had moved a little bit, just a few centimeters. But he thought it must be his imagination. And there was so much to do. They were doing refurnishing. They were going to take out the carpets, and they were calling all sorts of people. And as they sat there having lunch together, Lawrence, Tom, and him, he mentioned the scuttling and all that, and he asked Tom what it could be, and Tom said, "Well, I don't know. This place doesn't have rats or anything. At least I don't think it does." And Lawrence said, "You know what it probably was? That teddy bear on the table must be haunted or something." They all had a good laugh about this, but Raymond wasn't so sure. And that night, as he was going to bed, he put down some blue tape and put it right underneath the bear, and he set it on top of it. And he went to sleep for a second, not even going fully to sleep, just keeping one eye open, watching the bear. But eventually he did go into slumber, and that night the same thing happened. The creaking on the floorboards, the whispers. And when he woke up that morning, he noticed that there were tiny little pinprints on his arm, but he couldn't figure out what they were, or how they had got there. And he looked over at the bear, and it was still where it was supposed to be, and he laughed to himself, thinking he was being silly. But as he looked down on the floor, he noticed that in the dust there seemed to be footprints, little scuttle marks. Maybe it was rats, or maybe it was something else. This continued for some days. As the days rolled by, it started off very slowly, but the more and more that Raymond went to bed and went back to work, the more he began to notice that things were going wrong. He was becoming paler and whiter, and he'd go into the toilet and have to throw up. And oftentimes the pin points would go all across his hand, and even Lawrence was noticing, and um, he did his best to explain it as just being stress and something that happened, but Tom didn't seem to believe that and said he'd never heard of anyone getting those kind of marks from just stress. And also, the teddy bear did move occasionally in the room. It would be on the top of the cabinet, or maybe it would be on his bed. And Raymond did his best to tell the bear that it needed to stop, that if it continued doing this, he was going to throw it away or cast it in the fire. And he didn't know why it was he didn't do this, but something always stopped him. It became even worse as the days went on, for at one point the bear was found hanging on the banister, and Lawrence asked Raymond whether he had done this, and Raymond said no, that it hadn't been him. But Lawrence didn't seem as convinced. And one night, the two of them, Lawrence and Tom, sat Raymond down and they had a talk with him. And Lawrence said, "Look, I understand you've been under a lot of stress right now, getting this hotel running again, getting all the new stuff in and bringing in some old stuff. And I have to ask you whether or not you can handle this." And Raymond said, "I can. Look, we've only got one more night here, and then we are going to be done. I'll just stay and see what happens by the morning." Well, anyways, Lawrence and Tom both agreed. And that night, Raymond went to sleep, but Lawrence did call Raymond's wife, and he told her about everything that had happened and said, "I don't know, he's my best friend, and I don't want to betray him, but the way he's acting, I wonder if I shouldn't get him help. I mean, right now it's just little marks, but what if it became something more? And the way he's moving this bear around on its own, acting like it's alive, acting like it's whispering to him. I wish he'd throw the damn thing away." Well, anyways, the woman told him that she would go call someone and they'd figure it out, and that he shouldn't worry. He'd acted always a little bit quirky in his time, but it was usually something he could get over, and Lawrence finally agreed. And as he went off to bed in the night, whatever this thing was began doing it again. It began creaking the floorboards, and it began scuttling, and Raymond could hear it, and it became louder and louder in his ears, and then all at once he felt a pain in his side. And he opened his eyes, he tried to look around, but all he could see was darkness, and he let out a scream, he yelled again and again, "Help, help, help!" But his sounds just echoed in the darkness. But then he could hear footsteps running down the hall. And then the door opened and the lights turned on, and Lawrence was standing there. And he looked at him. "Oh my God, Raymond, what have you done?" Tom was coming up behind him, and he came out. What's going on?" Raymond was sitting there in a pool of his own blood, and down below him was the teddy bear, and it too was laying in a puddle of blood, and a knife was in front of him, and Raymond said, "It was him. I swear to God, it was him. He tried to stab me in the night." Lawrence said, "All right, I think I've had enough of this. Okay, go ahead and Tom and take that teddy bear and throw it in the rubbish bin." Tom agreed, and he grabbed hold of it, and Raymond said, "Burn it! Burn the thing if you have to." Anyways, Lawrence sat down with Raymond, and they both just sat there in silence, and Raymond said. "I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. I just guess I thought that we could come back here and things would be simple like they used to be. But things never were simple, were they? Things were always hard. I've been trying to reclaim my youth, but I don't think my youth was as good as I remembered, and now it's come back to bite me." Anyways, Lawrence didn't say anything. He just got up and he walked and said that he was going to call the police. But anyways, Raymond sat there wondering and realizing that his whole life was over and that soon enough he was going to be taken to an asylum. And as he was sitting there, he heard a noise in the closet, and at first he thought it was his imagination. But then the door opened and a woman came out, dressed all in white, with black hair, and she went over and closed the door and locked it. And she turned to him. "I'm sorry that I've had to do what I've done. I suppose you remember who I am," he said. "Yes, Ebenezer, you're the spinster's daughter. What, what's going on? What have you done?" And she said, "I suppose I should explain myself, but we'll have to move quickly, as he might be coming through the doors here any moment. You see, for the past 20 years I've been in love with you. In love with you in the deepest level a person can be in love with someone. I memorized your every blink, your every movement, how you touched my hand that one time at Thanksgiving dinner. And I made a world for myself, a world of toys, and a world where you were still here, and we were still together, still with each other. I even found that bear of yours, Charlie, but, of course, it wasn't real. I always knew it wasn't. But the pain was so much, I tried to find other men. You have to understand that. I did. I tried so many other men, but none of them could ever compare to you. Then when I heard you were coming back, I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to end my suffering. So I decided that I was going to kill you. I told all of my toys that this was going to be the end of him, and this was going to be the end of us. I must have told that teddy bear quite 1,000 times, but I didn't realize at that time that the teddy bear had a spirit within it. I thought I'd seen it moving before, and I thought I'd felt a spirit within myself. I don't know what these things are, but they moved me to do what I did next. I got some food, and I hid underneath this hotel, in a place even my father didn't know about, but my mother did. It was a place that they used to go down in Prohibition and drink beer. My mother used it to smoke weed, but I decided to use it to bring myself closer to you. I was the one making the floorboard creak, and I used my father's old keys to get in and out, putting rat poison in your drinks. I'm sorry that I've had to do all of this, and I felt that I needed to end your suffering many a time, but that bear was always there on your bed, or sitting up on the top of your cabinet waiting for me, looking at me with its judgmental eyes. I wanted to destroy it. I tried many of times, but I never could. It was like if I killed that spirit, the both of us would come to an end. And so this night I came the closest I ever had, cutting your side, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it with that thing standing there. But now that it's gone, don't you see, this can be the end of both of us. We can both be together forever in the next world. In the next world, we can find happiness. And she, happened to have, she, walked over and she, picked up the other knife and she, got towards his bed and raised it up. "Now, wait a minute. Let's just, talk about this, Ebenezer. You're not thinking right," she said. "I know what I'm doing exactly. Our spirits are going to be intertwined together forever in the heavens." And she had a big smile on her face. But at that moment, the key in the door, a key went into the door, and it came right open, and Lawrence was standing there. "I heard everything," he said. Put it down right now." He had a gun on it in his hands, and she said, "So, you knew I was here?" "Yes," said Lawrence. "I could hear you two talking from the lobby. Now, I just want you to put down that knife right now." She shook her head. No, it can't be over. It can't." And Lawrence, he finally couldn't take it anymore. He pulled the trigger and he shot her. It was only in the legs, but she let out a gasp and she dropped the knife and she looked down at the blood. No, it can't end this way. I won't allow it." And she started running, and Lawrence wanted to stop her, but Raymond said, "No, no, don't. Just let her go." And she started running down the hall. And after a while, they heard a scream, and they both looked at each other, and they both stood up, and they ran outside, and it was raining now, pouring down the rain very heavily. And they looked over, and they could see that she was lying there on the ground, and she was sobbing, and there was blood dripping from her head. And there next to her was the bear, clung to her leg. And Tom came up. "It blew away in the wind, the storm going on, the teddy bear. I'm sorry. Who's she?" he said. And Lawrence said, "Oh, thank God that I've called the cops. All right, get a hold of her. I think everything's going to be all right now." So they waited, and it seemed like an eternity for the cops to arrive, but maybe it wasn't really as long as they thought. But they did come, and they took Ebenezer away, and she didn't say a word. She just went with them, and she said she would confess to everything. And as they were sitting there, Lawrence did his best to comfort Raymond and said, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." But he didn't answer. He just kept looking at the bear and thinking to himself how it had done so much and tried so much to protect him, and how all he had wanted to do the whole time was destroy it. And finally he got up and he started to walk, and he seemed to be going out into the town, and Lawrence said, "Wait, you're not leaving, are you?" And Raymond said, "Yes, I think that I am. I'm not quitting the business or anything. I need to be alone for a while." And so he went off into the town, another lost soul. And I suppose the story, you're going to think to yourself how absurd it is, the idea that a teddy bear would come back to its original owner and try to protect him from a world that was trying to destroy him. And you might think to yourself, if you saw a man walking down the street with a teddy bear in your hands, all you could do was laugh and jeer at him. But I would advise you not to, as, well, everyone needs sometimes a good friend there to protect them, and Raymond found his in the realm that we've all come to know, the Fireside Tales.